Welcome to Viewpoints, brought to you by Equiture, the leading provider of public safety software and training. My name is Sherry Bartram, and I will be your host today. A little bit about us before we get started. We are an international leader in public safety training and technology, with products geared toward helping public safety officials and employees stay safe and educated. For those of you who are new, we offer monthly podcasts with a variety of guests and topics all geared toward public safety, as well as monthly webinars and a diverse offering that is expanding of training courses. Today on our show, we have Tina Chaffin, a 911 training specialist with Training 911 Heroes. Tina started her career with 911 in 1996. And despite training over 600 hours a year, she continues to work in the Emergency Communications Center, often referred to as ECC. Tina is extremely passionate about the 911 professionals and advocates for dispatch personnel in many different ways. She firmly believes in recognizing dispatchers and urges emergency communication centers to encourage recognition from within, not just waiting for that letter of, hey, this dispatcher did a good job. It's that from within recognition. So keeping that in mind, in 2017, Tina launched an online training site to provide relevant, quality, low-cost training materials for dispatchers around the United States. She has over 18,000 students who have already taken advantage of that training. She's worked in both large centers and small centers, and she's currently working at a small PSAP in the San Antonio area. Welcome, Tina.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
I have a quick question. We have a quote of you saying, as the title suggests, of our podcast suggests, about your passion for public safety. Today we're going to talk about understaffed PSAPs and giving you or our audience an opportunity to ponder, am I part of the solution or part of the problem? So, Tina, back to that quote, you have said, public safety is ever changing, and to be an effective trainer, it's important to stay up to date and current with trends in technology. So when we take that, your topic today, this is a big topic to tackle, and no one really wants to think of themselves as being part of the problem. So we'll get to the meat of this later, but I'm curious, where did you get the idea to talk about the staffing problem in this context?
So I have worked at multiple centers, like you mentioned, and a lot of times we're getting that input from telecommunicators who are leaving, and they're saying this job's not for me. But in a lot of cases, what I'm observing in the centers that I've worked in, social media, in speaking with people, how many of those people are actually saying this atmosphere is not for me? And a lot of people would say it's the hours, it's the emergency, the calls that we take. But I think sometimes the reality is that the job itself is hard, right? And there's so much stress related to not knowing what's going to be on the next line. When I go to work, I don't want to come into an environment where I don't feel welcome. I don't want to come into an environment where I'm treated poorly because I'm the new kid on the block. I also want to be given every opportunity to succeed. I don't want to just be rushed through the training program so that we can fill that seat. And so what I've observed over years is, put simply, we scare a lot of our people away. We scare a lot of good dispatchers away. We don't put enough effort into making them feel welcome, giving them the tools that they need to be successful.
Well, That is so relevant. I used to say, oh, okay, you come in and you have a trainer and they kind of shelter you and, put buffers up around you while you're learning your job. And then you're released from training. And it's like, oh, don't eat our young. They're our young. And it's not an age thing, I'm talking about tenure, but, I couldn't agree with that more.
Well, and in that aspect, I think that as dispatchers, trainers, we have this mindset that, oh, they're done with training, they're on their own now. And we're just kind of leaving them out there to sink or swim. And there really is no reason why we can't continue to check out on them, continue to be a resource for them. I think those check-ins are critical on new employees. I literally had a girl, I had trained her, put her on the floor at a large agency where I worked. And one day when I came in, I saw her in the hall and I could tell something was wrong. And I said, hey, what's going on? And she said, well, I took this call and I don't feel good about it. And it ended in a bad way. I feel like I messed up. Nobody's talking to me about it. I don't think this job's for me. And I said, come on, let's go in here. Cause she was going to be a good dispatcher. And I said, let's go talk about it. And I sat her down and I talked to her. But it's sad that I had to do that. Why, as a new person, wasn't that support there for her? I say it takes a good 2 years to be a good dispatcher. Now, by no means is that hard and fast, but typically at 2 years, you have experienced some of everything. You're used to the unknowns a little bit better. So for those 2 years, why aren't we given the support to these individuals? We're looking at the calls that they take and recognizing when it's something that's difficult, when they might need a little bit of talking to or a little bit of positive reinforcement to say, hey, sometimes we can't fix things. Sometimes things are going to happen and, you have to move on to the next call. And you have to know that if you quit, you're not here to save that next person.
Oh, that's really good insight. The dispatch centers, the dispatch centers that you have worked in, you're kind of talking about a mentoring, peer support kind of an atmosphere.
Exactly. But unfortunately, we don't see that too often in this profession. And part of it right now, of course, could be that we are critically low staffed in multiple places around the country. Some of our big agencies are anywhere from 40 to 60% down on staffing. So it's very hard for them to have a program that is successful and still be able to maintain their jobs that they're responsible for. I just think sometimes we really need to look at what are we doing to support people, and it doesn't even have to be a new person. Sometimes someone will have something happen in their life that changes their mindset, be it a loved one was in a car accident, perhaps their dad had a heart attack, and we need to be able to recognize that those calls are going to be a lot harder than they ever were prior to that incident. And so we should be looking at those things and taking those things into consideration that, hey, next time John takes a call of a heart attack, let's set him down and just give him a quick break and make sure he's okay.
Yeah, those are really good points. The quote that you said about public safety technology, ever-changing environment, how do those things fit into this topic?
So there's a lot of technology out there. Being able to use that technology and, it's very rare now that we can't find someone with all the technology that we have available. And we are having people come in that are really good with technology. They're really good with thinking outside the box and being able to harness some of those skills and some of I don't want to say generations, because I really don't like putting trainees and employees into generations. But generally speaking, we have a lot of tech savvy people and we need to harness some of that and If you've got somebody that's really good at the techie side of things, then maybe they become a trainer on the techie side. Personally, I love to train in the classroom, not a techie trainer. I learn very quickly, and I don't like to teach tech myself because if I've told them how to do it 2 or 3, 4 times, it frustrates me. So we need to look at our trainers and what they're good at and place them in those proper positions. Because if I'm getting frustrated, then that's feeding over to the trainee, and they're feeling like they're not doing good enough, or they're letting me down. So we need to look at the skills that our trainers have, be it technology, people skills. I'm a huge advocate of personalities. I think that testing your trainers and your trainees in personalities is essential. But your trainers have to understand that it's their job to mold themselves to the trainee's personality and their learning styles. And if you don't understand that and you don't understand personalities, it's very hard to work with that. So to me, the technology, the different, what are you good at and how can you help the agency? How can you help this new trainee?
Yeah, I can think of a half a dozen experiences right off the top of my head with what you just said. One of the things I thought was most interesting was when we have a trainee and the trainer, you could see that frustration growing, and they would say, "Oh, so and so's coming in today. Every day's a new day," because they felt like they had to keep going over the topics day after day after day. And I understand there comes a point where you have to say, okay, maybe this job isn't for you. But I fully agree with your first statement that how many people are we losing? So I really agree with your statement about how some trainers just get really frustrated. I have the experience of seeing trainers, sit there, oh, so and so is coming in today. Every day's a new day, because they would be so frustrated that the trainee wasn't getting it as fast as they were teaching it. Although I do understand and agree that sometimes this job isn't for everyone. But your first, one of your opening statements was, how many people are we losing? How many people are we losing? And so that goes back to your whole topic today. Are you part of the problem or the solution?
Right. And unfortunately, one of the things that we're seeing, and I've seen this for years, but you have to consider that we have so many people coming in and out. And I can tell you this from my online training, because I'll have agencies and inevitably they'll say, okay, these 4 people aren't here anymore. Here's the 2 new ones to add. Interestingly enough, the number that they're losing never equates to the number that they're gaining, unfortunately. And so it's a constant revolving door, right? But where are we losing those people? I have a hard time believing this job isn't for me. And the reason for that is this isn't a job that you just fill out an application and boom, you start work tomorrow. You have to jump through hoops of fire to get this job. You have to sit through interviews. You have to go get polygraphed. You have to do a psych evaluation, at least in Texas. There are so many steps to get this job for you to all of a sudden show up and just say, oh, yeah, this job's not for me. And don't get me wrong, the hours, a lot of people think they can do the hours, and a lot of people's bodies say otherwise. So I do understand, this job is not for everybody, definitely. But we have to stop and take a look at, where are we losing these people? And if we're losing them in training, then we need to do 2 things. We need to look at our training program, and we need to see, what are we teaching? Are we teaching them skills that can help them? Are we giving them, my biggest pet peeve in training, are we giving them a training manual and crossing out every other page and saying, oh, this doesn't apply anymore? We don't do that anymore. Because as a trainee, I'm thinking, oh no, if it hasn't been updated to take things out, what am I supposed to be doing that hasn't been added in here? And the second thing you have to look at is your trainers. Again, because we're so short-handed, unfortunately, a lot of trainers in this profession are burnt out. Even not necessarily with that one trainee, but they've trained back to back to back to back. And I can remember that feeling early on in my career where I would sign up for overtime just so I could come into work without a trainee. I just wanted a day by myself to work the radio or answer phones. And if you consider where we're at on staffing now, then essentially what happens is these trainers never get a break. And then they might be good for one or two trainees, but by the time the third trainee comes in, they have very little patience with them. They don't want to be there. They're frustrated with their agency and they relay that. And so now you've got a trainee saying, what kind of place did I come to work for? Everybody's miserable here. What do I do?
So Tina, when have you presented this concept before? Are you part of the problem or part of the solution?
I have presented it at a couple of state conferences. Got really good feedback and a lot of comments like preach it because it literally is what we're seeing in the centers. And, those frustrations are there. It's not just the management level. The frustrations go all the way down to the newest people on the floor. And we have to just kind of look at what we can do to make the environment better, perhaps.
So, people, with your personal experience of this topic, if people are looking at it and they're saying, wow, this is great, wish my manager could hear that, how many people actually feel like they're part of the problem and that they can help implement those changes?
Unfortunately, I think because we are type A personalities and very hard type A personalities, I think a lot of people don't want to admit they're part of the problem. And it goes even to, I've been at agencies where, well, I'm not going to bother to learn your name because you're not going to be here very long. And that's just kind of their life. And they feel like that's the revolving door. They don't see anything wrong with that concept. Of course, you have certain people that just aren't people person, which is interesting, but you do have that happen sometimes. But I think there's some level of denial. And that kind of goes to another point that if you have somebody at your agency and they are mistreating new employees, they're not being helpful to those new employees, the management has to step in and deal with that. I worked at an agency that refused to deal with one person. This person was a problem child. This person was coddled, and they lost 6 of their employees over not fixing the problem with him. And essentially it got down to the point that it was myself, a part-timer, one full-time person, and the admin, who thank goodness was trained in dispatch. And we carried that agency for 3 years because once it became apparent he was going to have to fill his parts because he had scared everybody off, he quit too. So they could have solved the whole problem by telling him, hey, change your attitude or do some remedial training, get that passion back, or maybe it's time for you to seek other options. But instead, they let him scare off half a dozen people, which left the agency critically short.
Wow. So how do people, even maybe they don't recognize themselves as a problem, but they feel maybe helpless? How can the PSAP personnel, how can they all become part of the solution, in their own way? I mean, you've touched on a couple things as far as mentoring, but what are your thoughts on that?
My number one thought on that is stop posting negative stuff on social media. I want to shake some people sometimes when I see some of the posts. I see somebody that is so excited. I've been, waiting for this job my whole life. I've wanted to do this my entire career. I finally got hired. Who has some suggestions for me? 30% of those suggestions are don't do it. It'll ruin your life. Go work at Walmart. And my thought process is if that's your attitude online, you must be really pleasant to work with. And you want to sit here and you want to complain, but yet you're pushing people away from this profession. You're telling them that this isn't a good profession to work in. And I would counter that and say, okay, we do have a stressful position. We do have things. In my experience, the true emergencies are far and few between. A good 90 to 95% of my calls start with, it's not an emergency, but, those true heart-wrenching emergencies are far and few between unless you work at a really large agency. So tell me what job doesn't have issues. Tell me what job you can go work at that doesn't have personality issues, that doesn't have managers who play favorites, that, doesn't make you work some overtime or, work your birthday. I just saw a huge social media thing about a girl who was just totally offended. Her agency fired her because she didn't show up. Not agency, sorry, she wasn't a dispatcher. But her work fired her because she just randomly didn't show up on her birthday, thought that she shouldn't have to work. I had this conversation with my mom years ago. I said, Mom, I don't know about this. I don't know about this job. And she said, Tina, you're not going to find a perfect job. You're not going to find a job where everything is peachy. There's always going to be an employee who only does the bare minimum. There's always going to be an employee that breaks the rules and gets away with it. There's going to be managers that have their favorites. You love what you do. You're passionate about what you do. Deal with it and move on. And that's kind of what I've done. I think it's harder for some people, but if I have wanted this job and I go make a post and ask for advice, and 30% of the advice is, you've made a mistake. Don't do it. It's not too late. Turn around. Walmart's hiring. Go work at Jack in the Box. It's better. You've just crushed my soul before I even started. And I mean, some of the things I've seen people post about their trainees, about people coming in for applications. I've seen people post that they'd like to portray physical violence onto their trainees. I've seen people say extremely hateful things to applicants. And the sad part is when they're posting this, they're almost proud of it. They're almost proud of the fact that, well, I made them see the right side of this. And I mean, social media is where it's at today. And not to mention how many people are looking at that post that might have been excited when they got old enough, and now they're seeing all this negativity and they're taking that off their list of things they might want to do when they graduate high school because everybody hates this job. Everybody thinks it's horrible. And I just want to shake people when I see them put something like that on the internet, because you are pushing away good candidates. And if that's the way you feel, then maybe it's time for you to go get that job at Walmart.
Right. And how often is that the case where, you should run away. Everybody hates it. And it's, not everybody. It's really just that person. You're saying you saw social media posts. I remember a post a few years ago that a dispatcher put up there, and it said, "This job is slowly sucking out my soul." And I was like, wow, that's deep. Thanks for, posting it on your page where everybody knows where you work. What were you thinking? Well, somebody else posted it, so I thought I would post it. And we never could get a clear answer on why the person thought it was so bad. But you mentioned other jobs. I mean, business professionals deal with this similar thing all the time. My brother is retired from a very, very well-known company in this country that I won't name, but and he was telling me the same. In fact, the stories he were telling me was so similar. I thought, wow, that's like working in a peace app, but it's just working. And I think, like you said, I think some people forget or just don't know.
My sister owns a Dairy Queen. And it is incredible to me how we can have a conversation and we're on the same page, be it about employees, about customers. And it's like, how would those two things correlate? But, she has the same exact issues in that world that we see too. And so sometimes the response I get from people when I try to say this is, well, yeah, but they're not taking calls from, kids who aren't breathing and heart attacks. And again, 95% of my calls it's not an emergency, but, and to me, I don't let the job suck the life out of me. I enjoy this job. I'm one of few people, I think, that's 27 years in. I love answering the phone. I got called some really colorful names a couple nights ago, and it just made my night better because I was like, well, at least I'm not having as bad a night as this person is. Yesterday, I was told I was awesome. I was appreciated. But here's something else to consider. If you have that attitude with new people, people that are going to come in and people that are going to, save you from having to work overtime, what is your attitude to the callers on the phone? And what scares me about that is you're encouraging people most likely not only to not take this job, but if you have that same attitude in the center, you're encouraging people not to call 911 again. Thus, you're not encouraging, or rather, you're saying that someone hangs up the phone with you and thinks, wow, after that, I might as well not even call 911. And then the next time that person sees a guy set a bag down at the state fair, they think to themselves, well, I would have called about that, but last time I was treated like, crap, so I'm just not going to call. And the next thing you know, we have an explosion. And so that's what scares me about the attitude I see online, because there's no way you have that attitude online and you don't have that attitude in your center and with your callers.
Right. So that's a really good opportunity for people to do a self-check.
Exactly.
You said something about trainers. You've talked a lot about trainers. Do you believe, this is probably a rhetorical question, do you believe that our problem with understaffing starts with the trainers and their abilities? Not only to train, they may be awesome trainers, but maybe their people skills. Is that kind of your belief?
I think that training is a big problem, but I think the problem actually starts before that. And it's kind of twofold. One, what are you doing? What kind of vetting are you doing of the people that you're hiring? So I think the problem starts with the hiring process, but on two different ends of the spectrum. One, you haven't vetted a person well enough to know if they can truly do this job, whether they can multitask, whether they can put up with the stress, whether they can deal with the anxiety of the job. Maybe just having them sit in the center, listening to some of the calls, making sure that they understand. It's incredible to me that in 2024 I would have this situation, but I had a girl come to me after I played a really difficult call. The dad killed his entire family in the middle of the night, to include a couple little kids. And this girl came to me and said, that's not true, right? That's not real. People don't really do things like that. And I thought to myself, how do you not know things like that happen? But I suppose some parents shelter their children. So we have to make sure these people know what they're walking into. But on the other end of that spectrum is, does it really take 6 to 9 months to do my background and to vet me? Because at that point, I need a job. I got kids to feed. I don't have time to wait 6 to 9 months. Not to mention, during the 6 to 9 months, for whatever reason, you felt like the best thing to do is just ignore me. Just let me sit out here and wonder what's going on. And I've never understood that about our profession. So I believe the problem initially starts with hiring. Either we're not hiring the right people, or we have the right people and we're taking half a year to a year to get them in the position. And a lot of people aren't going to be able to wait for that in this economy. So it starts there. Once we get them in, I definitely think training is a big part of it. But I do think it does initially start with hiring. It starts at the very beginning.
Boy, that's really good. That information's really good. I do have some, just a couple more questions, though. There are many different resources available about this topic. How to hire, how to retain, how to train, because it's an industry-wide dilemma. What would you tell a small PSAP? You mentioned you knew some larger PSAPs that were like 40% down on staffing. What would you tell a small PSAP that the first thing that they need to do to try and stay fully staffed? And the reason I ask you about small specifically is when you have a small PSAP, 4 to 7 people, you lose one person and you feel it. You lose 2 and now you're really hurting. Whereas 1 or 2 people in a larger PSAP is just manageable. In fact, they could even probably float that way for a while. So how would you apply the information you've given us to whether it's large or small?
I think that a big part of this is finding the candidates, and a lot of people think it's really difficult, and perhaps it is, but I think there's a number of things that we can do. And in the small community, especially, we need to be looking for candidates, not just putting an ad in the paper, but if I go somewhere and I have excellent service, I tell that person, I ask them, have you ever thought about being a 911 dispatcher? And you would be surprised how many people say, well, it's funny you say that because I kind of want to, I thought about getting into police, but I'm not sure. And I'll always tell them it would be a great stepping stone. Literally went somewhere to get some car detail. It's going to clean my car. I have the products. I still haven't cleaned my car. But I go in there and I have my shirt on that shows that I'm 911. And the guy says, are you really 911? Which I thought was an interesting comment. And I said, yeah. And he goes, I need to talk to you. My daughter, she's her whole life, that's all she's wanted to do. Would you please help her? And I said, absolutely. Give me my business card. I allowed her access to some of my training. And if you have candidates that want to take some of my training, just contact me. I'd be happy to let them go through some of it. We've got calls in there. They'll hear, unfortunately, someone who takes their life on a call, some of the things they'll have to deal with. I give her access. I give her some tips and tricks about filling out her application, the interview process. I did tell her that just a heads up, they may ask you if anyone helped you prepare, and be honest about that and tell them you worked with a dispatcher. And within about 6 or 7 months, she was hired by our local county agency, and she sent me an email from her county email, and she was so excited. To this day, I've never met the girl. All I know is I helped get her a job as a dispatcher because I had a 911 shirt on. And I'm always looking for candidates. In my city of, Facebook group, see this comment all the time. My college kid just got out of college, can't find a job. Anybody have suggestions? Every single post I put on there, 911 is hiring. If they are interested, I can give them some assistance with it. I can talk to them about it. We don't, I see Amazon's hiring, Walmart's hiring. 911 is always hiring. Look for people asking for jobs, for their loved ones, for their significant others. If you're at a safety fair and you are talking to people, mention it to them. Tell them, after you do your little 911 spiel about safety and such. And just so you know, we're always hiring. If you've got a sister or an aunt or someone that you think might be interested. I have done this my entire career. And again, you'd be surprised how many people are interested. I actually had someone in one of my classes last week for his project. One of the things he said is get a QR code and have that QR code go to a Google form. And that Google form just takes their information and it basically says, hey, I might be interested in this job. And the reason why that's important is because I can talk to you at the safety fair and you think, oh, wow, that's great. But you go home and you totally forget about it and you don't think about it again. But if I give you that QR code at the safety fair, boom, you sit there, you fill it out, and now I have a contact and we can communicate and I can remind them that they might be interested in this job. I think there's a lot of things we can do. I just think it's up to us to be out there looking for candidates and looking for people with good customer service, good multitasking, good attitudes. And I'm not going to lie, they're far and few between these days, but when you see them, try to pull them in. This job has job security. It has benefits that they're not going to find in most other places. It's rare that someone would match our retirement 2-to-1 or even 1.5-to-1. And even for, single parents, if they've got mom or dad that can help them with their kids, this job is job security. This job helped me feed my children, give them a house to live in their entire life, and, do the fun things too. I worked a lot. I missed a lot, but my kids had a great life because of this job.
And that's important too. I think, well, personally, I don't think I've ever talked about our job in those specific terms, but you're right. I can say the same thing. That's good for people to remember. I do have another question. You have trained a lot of hours, and then you're still working in the PSAP. How do you juggle that yourself? When we talk about, maintaining a attitude and demeanor, how do you not get so tired that you slip?
Honestly, I'm currently at a PSAP working this week, and I told him I was up here to take a break. I have been working in the classroom for the last 3 weeks solid with police officers, trying to train them to be trainers for the state. And needless to say, I was ready to come up and deal with some 911 after 3 weeks of classroom training, trying to teach people how to do PowerPoint. And I'll say it again, I love answering the phone. I love 911, the things that people come up with. There's just something about it. Even if I make the smallest difference, the call that I mentioned, the guy told me I was awesome. All I did is I put in a call because his dad had a suspicious vehicle. The son's an hour away. And before I hung up, I said, let your dad know that anytime he can always call us on 911. It's not a bother. We want him to call. I don't want him to feel like he has to call you an hour away. Tell him to call us on 911. We'll help him. And the son said, that's really nice of you, and I really appreciate you saying it. But the thing is, I mean it. I want people to call 911. And some people, oh, it's not an emergency. I answer both phones. It doesn't matter if it's on 911. It doesn't matter if it's on the non-emergency. I'm going to answer it. And some of our admins are pretty good about telling people just to call 911 anyway. So I've given up the fight on, oh, it's not an emergency. Don't call this number. I've given up the fight. And to me, I mean, I know it's crazy, but to me, being up here working 911 is a break for me. And now I will tell you that I'm sleepy because my schedule's a little off kilter. When I train, I'm 8 to 5. Right now, I'm working 7 p to 3 a.m. And my body's kind of in a craze trying to figure out where we're at. But I love it. And I think that it puts the passion back in for me. I'm a passionate trainer, but I'm an incredibly passionate telecommunicator. And as such, taking the time and doing both allows me to continue my passion with both. I think it would be hard to be so passionate about my 911 callers if I wasn't still answering the phone.
Right. I understand that. Well, thank you very much, Tina. For our audience, Tina has a lot more information, a full presentation on this topic that she'll be doing with us in a live webinar coming up in February 2025. So watch for that. If you're in a public safety agency, you'll be able to have access to that. And Tina, I'm sure you've heard, oh, you can really make a difference, but I believe I saw on your website, it's not just about making a difference, it's about being the difference. And I love that. But that was on your website, is that correct?
Possibly. I've got a lot of stuff out there. But I will say, and I'll just put this out there, that you mentioned early on that I'm a huge advocate of recognition. And I do try on my website to recognize people that have made saves. I do send out stork awards. I don't have pins, but I send out little casino chips and magnets and a card when they have a baby. And I'm jealous every time I send one out because I'm 27 years in and I don't have a baby yet. But for me, it's very important that there are avenues for recognition. And at any point, if you have a telecommunicator or dispatcher that you really think has gone above and beyond and you don't have resources and you'd like to do something nice for them, you'd like to get them some, just a little thank you or some swag or something, just drop me a note and I'll put them on my website, just a little information about what they did, and I'll get something in the mail to them.
That's great. Thank you so much, Tina, for joining us today. And for all you out there, be the difference and have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.